Well, it's the much-awaited COVID-19 vaccine, and it's day one after it arrived. So how far so far, and where do we go from here? So many questions, so many issues that you are certainly looking for answers to, despite all that you have on the internet. Questions about where do you coming, so many things. But let's begin the conversation with the Executive Director, CEO of National Primary Healthcare Development Agency, Dr. Faisal Shuaib. He joins us virtually from Abuja. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Well, I don't know if congratulations is in order, but then this is where we are now, and there are definitely a lot of expectations. What are we to expect now, given the fact that the vaccines are now in Nigeria?
Good morning, viewers, and thank you for having me. With the arrival of the vaccines, the immediate steps that we took was to get NAFDAC to take a few samples of the vaccines, and they'll be conducting some final checks in the next 48 hours. Once they give us clearance that everything checks out, then we will start the process of rolling out the vaccination process. We plan to start the launch of the vaccines at the National Hospital, the treatment center that exists there. So the first person in Nigeria who's going to be taking the COVID-19 vaccine is most likely a health worker that has been involved in treating Nigerians that have been infected by COVID-19.
Well, that's one hand, and we also understand from information you have made available that there is a process to how Nigerians are going to get it. But then there are others who are asking the question, if that process is in place, why do we still need to register?
Right, so it's a question of getting the best of both worlds. So you may be aware that on Monday, we launched what we called the TEACH strategy for rolling out the vaccines in Nigeria. This involves a hybrid of traditional methods and electronic technology-backed methods. So on the one hand, we're looking at what happens in developed countries, but on the other hand, we're also contextualizing the process of rolling out vaccine, tapping into our very rich experience with the polio eradication program. It is because of some of these strategies that we have contextualized and also using innovative technology that we were able to finally eradicate white polio virus last year. So with this TEACH strategy, we will be rolling out vaccinations in designated health facilities all across the country. We'll also have teams of health workers that will be moving from settlements to settlements to get closer to where people live and work, and will be administrating these vaccines. But beyond that, we also recognize that there are people who live in very remote areas across bodies of water. Some people live in mountainous areas, places that are really, really dry. So we will also be deploying mobile teams to these populations so that no Nigerian who is eligible to get this vaccine is left behind. Again, these are from so many years of learning how to reach our populations, lessons that we've learned from eradicating the wild polio virus. But beyond that, we also know that we live in an age of technology. So one thing, for example, that the NIN registration has taught us is that we need to devise methods that will avoid situations where people will come to vaccination sites and they'll be overcrowded. It is also important for us to segment and prioritize the population. So the best way that we devised as a program, the Presidential Task Force, the Federal Ministry of Health, and specifically the National Primary Healthcare Development Agency and our development partners, is to really visualize how we can deliver vaccines to Nigerians in a way that will be stress-free, in a way that will be able to prioritize those people that need to get the vaccines. So by launching the e-registration, we're actually able to figure out how we can get Nigerians to register. So in terms of the TEACH strategy, the T stands for the traditional method. The E represents e-registration. So with the e-registration which we launched, we'll be able to get Nigerians to self-register. Nigerians who have access to internet, they'll register. We can tell from their age whether they're eligible, right? So this vaccine is for those that are 18 and above. So by identifying your age, we'll be able to tell whether you are among the people to be vaccinated. By identifying whether you're a health worker, we know whether you're among the people who should be getting the vaccines first, especially if you're a frontline health worker. By identifying whether you have underlying diseases, we'll also be able to know that you're among the people who are likely to suffer severely if you contract the virus. So you will be prioritized. But beyond that, because of the electronic registration, we'll be able to identify the health facilities that are closest to where you live. We'll also be able to identify the best time that works for you. So what date and what time of the day will be best for you. By being able to identify some of these preferences, then we avoid a situation where people are crowded in a room and then increasing the tendency for people to contract the virus in the process of getting the vaccination. But beyond all of that, we're not thinking about the short term. We're thinking long term. After we've rolled out this electronic management of immunization data system, we'll be transitioning it to our routine immunization system so that we'll have a situation where we'll be able to track and make sure that all our kids get the vaccines that they need to protect them against vaccine-preventable diseases. And we'll have a situation where anywhere a child goes in Nigeria, even if they don't have their immunization card, with the punch of a few buttons, their data will come up and we'll be able to know what vaccines they need to get. We also recognize that it is possible that some people live in areas where the internet might not be fully functional. We also recognize that there are Nigerians who might not be able to self-register just because they don't have the ability to do that, or they don't even have mobile phones. That is why the A part of TEACH represents assisted registration. So we're going to designate people with the local government areas in the wards, like ward focal persons who will help people register. Now, in terms of
just a moment. I'd like you to quickly speak to those who have issues with trusting this whole process. So we have a first batch of about almost 4 million doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine. And there are those who believe that this has been, allotted already. In fact, I did a little survey on my social media asking people if they're willing to take the vaccine. Some of them said yes, but they said they don't quite trust the government. In fact, someone else tweeted saying that, I hope you people know that the 4 million vaccines are for the president and his boys. So a lot of people are wondering how transparent this will be. And a lot of responsibility is on you, really, just to show Nigerians that this is as transparent as it should be. So how are you ensuring that?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me just take a moment to wrap up the TEACH strategy so that there's clarity around how this is going to be rolled out. There are going to be people who don't have access to internet. We are going to look at the rate of filling out those forms, and we have a way of determining those places where people are not registering, and we will send teams to homes to make sure that people are able to register. So even if people live in riverine areas, we're going to have teams that will go and help them register. And that does not preclude the fact that if anybody is not able to register, they'll be able to get to the health facilities, and there and then they will be able to get registered and they'll be vaccinated, and this will be linked into a data system, and we'll be able to figure out, in case there's any adverse event after following immunization, that it will be able to track which package of vaccine is responsible for that. So this leads me up to the issue of vaccine hesitancy. First and foremost, the concept and the phenomenon of vaccine hesitancy is a global phenomenon. It is not limited to Nigeria. And so the ways to address them are quite similar. It would require that people are provided with the right information. So in terms of the trend in the acceptability of the vaccine, what we've seen from analyzing over the last few weeks, starting from December, is that there's been a gradual improvement in the perception of Nigerians to the vaccine. We as public health workers, we as scientists, have been working in the last few years to make sure that we don't take for granted any questions, any concerns that Nigerians will have. it is our responsibility not to just offer the vaccine, but we also have to put in the hard work to convince Nigerians, to provide them with the information around their questions. So is there a chip, for example? No, there's no chip in the vaccine. Is it possible that this will change your DNA? No, it doesn't. That doesn't happen, right? So we have to also make sure that Nigerians have all of the information that is required. So I'll always give you an example of some of the videos that we saw late December, where an influential political leader actually said, no way, no how should we bring the COVID-19 vaccines to Nigeria. And with time, with engagement, with information, better information, he came out and shared another video and said, yes, we can bring the vaccines to Nigeria. However, we must make sure that NAFDAC certifies these vaccines as safe and effective. And that's exactly what we have done. Not only has the World Health Organization certified these vaccines for emergency use listing, but NAFDAC has also gone through a very rigorous process to make sure that these vaccines are going to be safe for Nigerians. So the work is not completely done. We've seen a situation where in late December, the rates of people who say they will accept the vaccine is about 25%, and we've been able to push that all the way to above 50%. There are people who say they are not so sure. If we add people who are not so sure to that mix, then we'll say, oh, maybe there's still some work to be done. We are not in any hurry to insist that, oh, people are going to take the vaccines. We know that Nigerians are very mindful that when they see their leaders come out to publicly take the vaccines, then they will say, oh, it must be safe. And when they look around the world and see how other nationals are taking the vaccines, then they'll say, yeah, it just doesn't make any sense to say these vaccines are targeted at killing only Nigerians. Then people will now, overcome that barrier. But it's going to be, it's going to also take asking our traditional leaders who have in the last few years have been front and center in making sure that they convince, their subjects, religious leaders coming out to actually take the vaccines and convincing their followers that there's no ill that is, being meted out against them. We feel that it is going to be a lot of hard work, but it's work that we're willing to do.
Right, taken. But the question here is about transparency, ensuring that those who get the vaccines are those who really need to get it, not those who know someone, which is a question I was trying to put to you, transparency. Some think that this has been allotted to people already. So how are you ensuring transparency? Have you chosen the people who will get this vaccine? How would you ensure that those chosen are people that really deserve to get it?
I'll tell you categorically that we have not already allotted these vaccines to the rich people or the people in the urban areas. Absolutely not. Mr. President has been very clear. Mr. Vice President has also added his voice. The chairman of the Presidential Task Force has communicated this. And in our Presidential Task Force media briefing, we've made it very clear in terms of who we're going to prioritize. And I will repeat it here again, that the first group of people who are going to be taking these vaccines are those people who have sacrificed in the last 1 year, taking care of all Nigerians that have come down with COVID-19. So the frontline health workers, those who on Friday we're going to be rolling out, we're going to be launching the vaccines with at the treatment centers, at the National Hospital. So first priority will be health workers that are in the front line. We're going to be also giving these vaccines to other, first responders. We're going to be looking at people outside of the health sector as well who are at risk of getting COVID-19. We're going to be looking at those strategic leaders like Mr. President, the Vice President, those people who will also want to take the vaccines publicly so that they can motivate their followers to take the vaccine, to convince them that the vaccine is safe. So that is sort of the first phase of the prioritization, right? The second phase will be around those people, again, who are likely to fare worse if they were to contract the virus. So the elderly people, the data should be very clear that if an elderly person contracts the virus, is more likely to die than if a younger person, a younger adult contract the virus. So we're going to be prioritizing those group of people in the second phase. In the third phase, we're going to be prioritizing those individuals who have underlying disease, what we call comorbidities. And this is why it is part of our e-registration system to identify any underlying disease such as hypertension, diabetes, heart or renal disease. What the data shows is that if you have any of these diseases, then you are likely to have severe disease and probably die from contracting COVID-19. So this is the third phase in terms of the people that we are going to be giving the vaccines. The fourth phase will involve the rest of the population, anybody who is above 18 years of age. Now, we're very clear that it is a moral responsibility and it is a test of our character as Nigerians to make sure that those people who require the vaccine, who need the vaccine, get it first. And we're not going to be compromising on that.
Dr. Shoaib, if I may come in, I mean, you do sound very fired up, all ready to go to administer these vaccines, and that is very good. And I'm sure that a lot of Nigerians are looking forward to you doing your work with that much enthusiasm. However, I want to take you back to your very first statement. Your very first statement when you said that the NAFDAC has taken a few samples and will be going to test to be sure that everything is okay. And for me, that's a bit worrisome because assuming all is not okay with this huge batch of vaccines that we've just received, are we really going to be honest enough to say all is not well?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm going to take the vaccine myself. So I'm going to publicly take the vaccine. So if NAFDAC says it's not okay, I'm not going to take the vaccine. But all I want to assure Nigerians is that, you know, this is like the final check. All of the major checks have already been done. And the same checks that are going to be done in the last 2 days are checks that we do every time we get vaccines, you know, into this country. So on a regular basis, we get routine immunization vaccines that, you know, you and I take, our kids take. It is exactly the same processes. And, you know, for decades, we've never had any opportunity or any situation where when these final tests are done, we say, oh no, the vaccines are not safe. This is just an extra layer of assurance, quality assurance, to make sure that all checks are in place. And, you know, we're very optimistic that it's not going to turn out negative. Nobody is going to take any vaccine without 100% confidence that it is safe. Mr. President, our leaders, the vice presidents are going to take these vaccines. We're not going to take any risk with any vaccine. So we do not take for granted this task that has been put on the shoulders of the Presidential Task Force, the Federal Ministry of Health, and specifically the National Primary Healthcare Development Agency. It is a task that we hold as very sacred, and we're protecting the vaccines very, very closely. We've increased security around the vaccines to make sure that people unauthorized access is not possible. So we're waiting on NAFDAC. We feel that they're going to do all of the checks that are necessary. And once they give us the green light, we'll be ready to roll out the vaccines. And I can tell you that there is a lot of excitement. You know, yeah, I know some people have their concerns and we're trying to address them. But I want to give you an example of the enthusiasm that Nigerians are showing around wanting to take these vaccines. So from around midday on Monday, when we launched the e-registration platform, in less than 24 hours, we already had up to 2.3 million Nigerians who had registered, and that number continues to increase. So we take that very, very seriously, and this is why we're going to be working very hard. Yes, the vaccines are here, but there's even harder work that needs to go on to make sure that we deliver these vaccines into the arms of Nigerians in a way that is respectful, in a way that is stress-free.
People will be relying on the experience that the National Primary Healthcare Agency has already gathered to ensure that the vaccines are safe. But I must say that, you know, this is also coming amidst some controversy. Some doctors, I don't know if you're aware of them or of their concern, the fact that this vaccine is being produced under patent. They believe that it might not be the exact same content as what the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine itself being produced in, say, the UK. They believe that the Covishield vaccine might be slightly different in terms of composition from what was originally produced. Do you have any word on that? And can you douse their fears on that particular account? Because they've been making some reference to the fact that there's been no phase 3 testing for this Covishield vaccine, which is what is currently in Nigeria. Are you aware of that controversy, and are you going to dabble in it?
Yeah, it is completely incorrect. The same content of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine that is produced in Belgium is exactly what we're getting from India. It is a collaboration, between notable, pharmaceutical companies. I also want to put on record that, the Indians are responsible for producing most of the vaccines that are produced globally, right? So they are leaders when it comes to vaccine production. And for me, as a public health practitioner, that is exactly where I would like Nigeria to be. And I know that there are a lot of efforts by the current administration to try and fast-track the process of local vaccine production. Now, in terms of whether or not it's exactly the same vaccines, it is exactly the same vaccines, and all of the clinical trials that are required have been done. Recall that the World Health Organization, a globally recognized organization, has given approval for these vaccines to be used. If there was any doubt whatsoever about their safety or their effectiveness, then they will not put their reputation on the line. That is why for us in the Presidential Task Force, we took careful and methodical steps to make sure that while many other countries were in a hurry to roll out vaccines that did not have WHO emergency use listing, we bided our time and said that we will not bring any vaccine to Nigeria unless and until it gets the World Health Organization's emergency use listing and it gets the approval of NAFDAC. Yes, it might have taken a little bit longer than maybe countries that rolled out Chinese vaccines or Russian vaccines, but we said we are not going to be giving Nigerians any vaccines that have not gotten that kind of, certification from WHO. And this is why, yes, we're here, but finally we're able to give Nigerians the vaccines that they need to protect them from COVID-19.
Well, we'll take a break at this point. When we come back, we will be speaking to another expert in the field to get his own opinion on what he believes should be the next step now, whether or not he's satisfied with what the federal government is planning to do with the arrival of these vaccines in Nigeria. Please stay with us. Welcome back. Now we're being joined by Professor Oyin Wagbara, who is a professor of toxicology, chemistry and microbiology. He's also the head of the Department of Biomedical Sciences at Nile University here in Abuja. You're welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you very much, Mark, for having me.
Well, you have heard with a lot of excitement now Dr. Schreib talk about the arrival of the vaccines and the process which they're going to go through to administer the vaccines to Nigerians. How did you receive the arrival of the vaccines yesterday in Nigeria? Well,
it was a very good news. A lot of people, a lot of Nigerians have been expecting this, the arrival of this vaccine. Fortunately enough, it came at the right time. However...
At the right time? Why do you think it's the right time?
Well, most of the people, because what is involved in vaccine production is a lot of process. But good thing that a lot of those bureaucracies were avoided by the manufacturers. So it came, instead of waiting about 2 years for vaccine production, it took less than mostly about a year plus. So it's a good news to us and to the global population that these vaccines are here for us to be able to fight this virus, for us to get protected. You know, the issue of vaccine production takes very long time, average of 3 to 4 years. The last time I was on this program, I mentioned that, but I'm glad that the scientists all over the world, all hands went on deck to make sure that the vaccine rollout came on a very timely period. So that's why I say that.
On the right time.
Yes.
Well, some people will say that, you know, the fact that we're not following the time frame within which a vaccine would normally be produced. We had been told before now that, yes, it will be a minimum of 2 years for vaccines to come out, but this has been provided for emergency use.
That's right.
And it's also coming in amidst a lot of disinformation, misinformation, and a lot of suspicion. It would seem that never at a time have we seen this level of vaccine hesitancy, and you know, a lot is being done to address that. Are you satisfied with the level of information we have out there to fight the level of vaccine hesitancy that we might experience in the country and elsewhere?
No, the situation on ground is this. This is the right time for the PTF and other stakeholders in the healthcare industry to make sure that awareness, the issue of awareness, is increased. For example, in the US, when this vaccine was first rolled out in the United States, there was a lot of hesitance, especially among minorities. But now, after about 2 months, you can see that the acceptance rate, the percentage has gone up. People are now opening up for them to be administered with this vaccine. So it's all about creating awareness. The vaccine production or administration of vaccine is not something that any human being or any scientist or any doctor will say, well, let me develop this vaccine in order to get rid of someone. Yes, there has been issues in the past that people were used as, for example, guinea pig for some sort of treatment, for example, the syphilis. But that era has passed. What we are facing now is a global pandemic where nobody is shielded from this pandemic. Everyone is vulnerable. So the best thing for us to do, and which the scientists and doctors globally has done, is to make sure that we put the right technology, right science in place in the production and manufacturing of this vaccine. So the issue of awareness is very key. I was listening to Dr. Shaibu explaining how the federal government is going to come up with the rollout policy. Yeah, it's good. But the issue of creating awareness so that citizens can be rest assured that we Nigerians that are here, that are going to get this vaccine, that this vaccine is safe. So that brings on board the politicians, the celebrities, people, the frontline worker was, look, if I'm going to take this vaccine, it is safe because I have family myself, so I need to protect myself and also my family. So the issue of getting involved by every individual to make sure that those who are in power, those who have the privilege to be able to convince a lot of people to look, this vaccine is safe, people should be able to come out en masse to take this vaccine. Well, the amount that has been procured is more or less a drop in the bucket, but it's a decision that has been made in the right direction. Now, what I will also suggest is this: is the Johnson & Johnson vaccine was just given approval in the U.S. They started using them in the U.S. yesterday. So the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is just 1 shot compared to the AstraZeneca, which is 2 shots. So we should be looking in that direction also to procure more vaccines from Pfizer and also from Johnson & Johnson because of the storage facility that we have here.
Well, I know that the Pfizer was not a favorite because of the storage. Yeah. I think looking at minus 85 or so degree Fahrenheit. And, you know, we went for the AstraZeneca because according to the primary healthcare agency, that's the storage for that one is something we're more familiar with. I think those are the words that they used. But looking at development now, as you rightly pointed out, 4 million is a drop in the bucket. Are you satisfied with the steps being taken to ensure that only those who truly need it for now are going to be able to get access to the vaccine? Do you have trust and confidence in the process that we will be reaching the most vulnerable as at now with what we have at hand?
Absolutely. Well, going by what Dr. Shebu just said,
yes.
The policy or the strategy that the PTF have put in place for the administration of this vaccine mostly is what is done, obtainable in other parts of the world. The frontline workers, the first responders, those that have comorbidity, or the elderly. So we are not doing anything different from what is obtainable in other parts of the world. So I think with such policy in place, I strongly believe
policy is one thing.
But implementation.
Implementation,
yes.
That's what I'm asking you.
Well, the implementation, we wait and see. Based on what Dr. Shebu just said this morning, if we're going to go by what he said, and I don't have any reasons to doubt him, I think I'm convinced as an individual to believe him that, yes, the right things are going to be done in order to make sure that those who are supposed to get this vaccine are the people that are going to get it. There's something he said that in the next 48 hours, NAFDAC is going to test. That's part of the quality control check that we do in production of anything. Surely the company that produced the vaccine has done their quality control check. Now, the Nigerian government will do theirs. If it is in line with what the manufacturers have found in the quality control, then the rollout can go. And he said that if they find out that it's not satisfactory, then they'll put a stop to it. So let's believe him and hope that Nigerians could be able to believe them, those who have been given charge to perform this huge task.
Well, I think many people will say that's just the formality. That test the NAFDAC is conducted, because are we really going to waste 4 million almost vaccines if something is anyway? We're hoping that there's nothing wrong with it. Let's not even brood over that. But let me take this over now to Dr. Schreib. I'm wondering, looking at the fact that what we currently have is but a drop in the bucket, as our guest here has said, and we need about 70 to 80% coverage to achieve herd immunity. When next are we looking to, I know you might say we have not finished dispensing of the ones we just got, but when should we be looking forward to the next batch of vaccines, considering the fact that it will seem that we're just going to be testing the ground or the waters with these ones that we've just received? Are we starting work on the next batch already?
We've already started working on the next batch of the vaccines. And thank you very much, Professor Wambara. I think your comments are spot on. The 4 million doses are part of the initial consignment of 16 million doses of vaccines we'll be getting through the COVAX facility. Now, these 4 million doses that we received yesterday came in completely free. So the federal government did not pay a single kobo for these vaccines. The balance of about 12 million or so doses will be arriving in batches between now and the month of May. The COVAX facility, which is as you are well aware, and a groundbreaking establishment involving Gavi, the Alliance for Vaccines and Immunization, CEPI, WHO, to make sure that there is fair and equitable access to vaccines globally. They will be providing us with vaccines to cover up to 20% of our population for free. So I just want to put that out there. But in terms of what additionally we have already done to get enough doses to cover Nigerians, we've already applied and done all of the paperwork that is required to procure up to 41 million doses of additional COVID-19 vaccines. Right now, this will be made up of about 22.9 million doses of the AstraZeneca and about 18.4 million doses of the Johnson & Johnson that Professor Wambara just mentioned. This is a single-shot vaccine, and it's one of the vaccines that we're going to be bringing. Now, the next consignment of vaccines from the African Union, the 41 million or so doses, will start coming from March across April and May. So we're looking at all of those opportunities. We're also engaging with the private sector. The private sector through CACOVID has also indicated that they'll be supporting the procurement of vaccines for Nigerians. So the horizon does look good that we'll be able to get the vaccines that we need. So 20% from COVAX, additional vaccines that are being procured, and we're already, in the final processes of trying to present to the National Assembly a supplementary budget that will make sure that we not only have the resources to procure additional vaccines for the year 2021, but across to 2022, ensure that there will be a provision in the 2022 budget to procure the balance of vaccines that we are going to get. Now, I want to just also state clearly that the frameworks that we're using to procure these vaccines are the cheapest possible opportunities to buy vaccines. We're not going into the open market to engage bilaterally with pharmaceutical companies, because usually those types of models makes the cost of vaccines very high. We're going through COVAX that uses the fact that there are up to 92 different countries to negotiate the cheapest prices for vaccines. We're also going through the African Union that is also negotiating with the pharmaceutical companies, and they're using, their experiences in negotiation to make sure that we get these vaccines for the best possible prices.
Well, just before we talk more about the efficacy of the vaccine, just some issues to clear up. So we understand that CACOVID, which you referenced, also they have supported this vaccine drive for Nigeria. So which one did they pay for, and when are we expecting that?
No, they're not paying for a specific vaccine. So what the plan is for, and they are still in the process of finalizing that process, is that they're going to be making resources available to support the procurement of vaccines through the African Union. So whatever vaccines we're getting through the African Union will be part supporting that payment. The exact amount of money they're going to be making available for that is not clear to me right now, but I know that they are still in discussions. And as you are well aware, they've spent up to 40 billion or so naira, trying in the first phase of trying to control the COVID-19 pandemic in Nigeria. And they've been a very, very strong supporter of the federal government to make sure that the impacts of this COVID-19 pandemic is minimized. So they are a veritable partner in our drive to try and make sure that we roll out these vaccines. So, for example, they have offered a cargo plane that will help us move the vaccines from Abuja to any states that has a functional airport. And for any state that doesn't have one, they will be able to support the process of making sure that from the nearest airport, these vaccines are conveyed in a cold truck, a truck that has a cold box, cold chain resources to this state. So they've been very, very helpful, and that collaboration is strengthening our ability to deliver. Of course, there will be challenges. Of course, we know that the whole program of delivering vaccines to the most rural areas is going to be challenging. But when you have multiple stakeholders working together, focused on one goal, then it makes these challenges even easier to surmount. But of course, they will always be there, and we'll have to just continue to put in the hard work that is required to overcome these challenges.
So the second part is we just got 3.9 million doses. For AstraZeneca, it's meant to be double jab. So does that mean that can only inoculate about 1.8 million people, or this is for 3.9 million people?
So we're looking to roll out these vaccines in a way that the largest number of people will be able to get the vaccines. In the end, it is difficult at this point to make a determination of when exactly we're going to get the next batch of vaccines. Well, clearly, we don't want to leave people waiting for a second dose. So we're going to be focused on getting people vaccinated with 2 doses. Also bearing in mind that we're expecting vaccines to come in, additional vaccines to come in from the COVAX facility. We're expecting vaccines from the African Union. So even before people may be due for their second doses, you might find that vaccines have arrived and we'll be able to give additional doses for the first time to other Nigerians.
Okay, so this is going to inoculate about 2 million people and not, 4 million.
Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about the efficacy, because I listened to the SGF in that report saying that, well, this is safe and efficacious. And what we've learned about what NAFDAC will do is anything to go by. I believe NAFDAC is checking for the safety of this vaccine and not the efficacy. And I'd like us to cast our mind back to what happened in South Africa. South Africa got this vaccine, the very first country to get in Africa. And I think after a while, after some studies, they realized that maybe this will not work for our strain. And I'm sure you remember the controversy that trailed that. Now with the talks about a certain Nigerian strain of the vaccine, how will we know how efficacious this vaccine will be for the Nigerian strain? In fact, the South African strain as well, which studies have shown has not been quite efficacious. So what is the situation on that?
Yeah, thank you very much for those insights. So the AstraZeneca vaccine was actually paused in South Africa because it was found from a relatively small study that it was not effective against the South African strain of the COVID-19, so what they call the B1351 strain. But that strain is the dominant strain in South Africa. So most of the viruses that have been isolated from South Africa actually belong to that family of COVID-19 viruses. Now, the NCDC, working with different other research institutions, have been looking for this strain in Nigeria, and we have not found this strain in Nigeria. Now, for all flights that are coming from South Africa, coming from the UK as well, anytime anybody is positive for COVID-19, that sample is further tested. So we go through what they call genomic sequencing to find out if this virus is what is causing that positivity. And this virus has not been found in Nigeria. What we found in Nigeria are a few strains of the UK virus. And this UK virus is susceptible to the AstraZeneca vaccine. So even in the UK, they continue to use the AstraZeneca vaccine. I am aware that the NCDC is working very hard with the National Institute for Medical Research and a host of other institutions to collect random samples from Nigerians and continue to work very hard to try and see if these strains exist. For us, this underscores the need for us to roll out the vaccination on time, because the more we delay the vaccination, the higher the tendency that these viruses will mutate and will become, resistant to the vaccine. So yes, we've laid out the plans for rollout of the vaccine, but the next and important next step will be how we collaborate with the states and the local government areas to make sure that this delivery system is successful, that it is done very, very efficiently. So if I'll just backtrack a little bit, at this point, we do not have concerns about the efficacy of the vaccine against the strains of COVID-19 viruses that exist in Nigeria.
Well, you earlier said that, the best thing for us to do would be to look in the long term, and perhaps that's the basis upon which we're asking these questions. But let me take this to Professor Onwagbara. Now, the issue of efficacy is definitely something that would concern, someone like you, and it is definitely something that will give people, reason to be sure that indeed we can trust the process, so to speak. We know that the whole idea of this first vaccine is as a result of the first strain. And we understand there has been mutations. And as Dr. Shoaib just said, the longer we delay, the more the chances that this particular virus would mutate into something else, consequently making it difficult for this particular vaccine that is out there now for emergency use to be effective on it. And we are also hearing that there could be more mutations and perhaps even a third phase. Some people are already saying that in the medical space. So where are we now? What do you think we should be doing to forestall an emergency in the long term?
Thank you very much. The issue of efficacy is very important. And from what is obtainable out there, this virus is doing what viruses do, which is to mutate. It's not something that is new. Those of us in the scientific world know that, yes, they are doing what they're supposed to do. However, from what we have already, the data available indicates that this vaccine can be able to forestall the replication of any strain of this virus. So there's no problem with that. It's effective, and the efficacy issue is very important. And for us to be able to forestall any future exposure to different strain of these viruses, scientists have done what they do best, and that is to make sure that the efficacy of this vaccine is very important and is right there at the front line. So the issue of, I don't have any doubt that this vaccine can be able to prevent the replication of these viruses. The scientific method, a lot of things are involved in vaccine production, and I think the manufacturers of this vaccine have taken those things into consideration. And I think this is a double strain virus vaccine that is being produced by AstraZeneca. That of Johnson & Johnson is a messenger RNA. That of Johnson & Johnson is a DNA virus vaccine, which is good. And to provide the efficacy needed, the Johnson & Johnson, I'm not an advocate of Johnson & Johnson, but because of what we have here in Nigeria, we don't know what the genetic profiling of this virus has been. I'm not with NCDC, so I don't know the work that is being done behind the scene to get the genetic mapping of this different type of this strains of this virus that have been isolated. So it's up to NCDC to tell us if actually the strain that is being isolated here in Nigeria is similar to that from the United Kingdom, where this vaccine is being produced. And with that, the level of efficacy should be acceptable. And I think the first dose gives about 65% protection, and then within 2 to 12 weeks, then the second shot can be given. And with that, it can give out about 80 to 90% protection. So efficacy should not be a problem in this case, because the scientific work has already been done. And it's just also an ongoing process in order to make sure that future production can be able to meet the demand and the need and the efficacy specification of any person that is going to get this vaccine.
Dr. Shoaib, quickly, I want to touch on the database, because I recall in your speech earlier in the week, you talked about the database such that a barcode can be scanned anywhere in the world to know whether you've taken the vaccine or not. So the one we have right now, the one that has been launched, is it localized in Nigeria or is it accessible anywhere in the world? Just how does that database work?
Yeah, so what we've been able to do is collaborate with different stakeholders in making sure that we have a robust system that can stand the test of time. In developing this system where we'll be able to link the database and the immunization data, we've collaborated with the Nigerian Minting and Printing Company, which is, as you're well aware, responsible for producing our currency. So they've been able to develop a seal that will be attached to a card. That seal contains a QR code. So once you scan that QR code, it links you up with the data that the person signed up to when he registered or when he was given the vaccines, and he pulls up the data, and it is very clear about when the person took the first dose, which vaccine the person took, when the person took the second dose, and which vaccine it was. So that linkage is there. So in an instance where we're beginning to see some countries say that perhaps in the future people will be required to show evidence of vaccination, then once Nigerians take this anywhere in the world, so for example, maybe you're going to the United States, or you're going for pilgrimage anywhere, once that QR code is scanned, it will pull up the data and it will show very clearly that you've taken the vaccines. Now, we're working with all of the organizations that can help us make sure that this system is foolproof. Just a few days ago, we also brought on board COVID to make sure that all of the information that we're collecting on this database is secure. So you can imagine that when we have, bankers, captains of industry within that COVID fold, they are lending to us the technology that you use to protect banking information, to make sure that whatever information we're gathering on this our database is protected, because we don't want data that we're going to be using for our kids to be out there. We're also working with all of the government agencies that are responsible for protecting our IT infrastructure, to make sure that this database is really protected. So we feel pretty confident, very comfortable about the work that the team is doing. Now, I want to make it very clear that we're not by any shade of imagination giving the impression that everything is perfect. Hell, I mean, no way.
That definitely, yes, Dr. Shaib, that definitely underscores the fact that there is a lot of questions to ask. There are so many questions, so many people will still want to ask. But as you said, it's an ongoing conversation. There are still a lot of questions about the hesitancy that people have. I see that the teach strategy that you put out does not quite elucidate on that, but I guess that over time we'll be able to get more information from you and possibly bring you back in future to talk more about it. But for now, we have to thank you very much for being a part of our conversation. Dr. Faisal Shuaib is Executive Director and Chief Executive Officer, National Primary Healthcare Development Agency. He joins us virtually from Abuja. Thank you so much for your time, as well as Professor Onyenwagbara, who is Professor of Toxicology, Chemistry, and Microbiology at Now University, also in Abuja. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time and thoughts. We're back in a moment. Do stay with us.
Well, he's a man of many titles. I'm just going to call his name that way. Uche Ekwe is the head of international relations at the Nigeria Labour Congress, and he's our guest this morning. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily.
Good morning. Thank you.
Well, I don't want to say that the report we saw there is another kettle of fish. We are going to ask you much later whether or not there's some rift between the NLC and the TUC. But this morning, what is at the top of our mind is this bill, which is now at the National Assembly. We heard it on the House of Reps, on the floor of the House of Reps, and it's past second reading. They're trying to move the minimum wage from the executive list to the concurrent, exclusive list, beg your pardon, to the concurrent list. And we're wondering, how is Labour taking that?
Yeah, we've made it clear that it is not acceptable, and it's a bill, it's an attempt actually to return us back to what we have moved ahead over 40 years ago. And one of the things clear from that is it's a mixture of two situations: desperation from certain political group, especially some governors, some very retrogressive governors who believe that they wouldn't pay minimum wage, and a combination of a display of illiteracy, yes, and I use the word illiteracy, on understanding the meaning of a national minimum wage. You can see people raise very petty arguments of, at times you hear some people say, oh, we're in a federal state, that true federalism means states will determine their wages. Of course, states will determine their wages, but all over the world, over 90% of nations in the world have national minimum wage. National minimum, that's the floor, the basic floor level of wages which no worker should receive less. They also showed ignorance, a high one, if you say minimum wage, because that's the target, the argument in the bill is that if you move it to concurrent, states can now determine their minimum wage. But what the people did not avert their mind to, if states determine the minimum wage of state workers and the federal determine the minimum wage of federal workers, who determines the minimum wage of the shop floor worker in Channels Television? Who determines the minimum wage of the shop level worker in these day newspapers? Who determines the minimum wage of the shop floor worker in the chemical industry and all other private industry, the construction companies? Nations have averted themselves knowing that even the private organization is where all sorts of practices that is anti the people comes up. That is why the ILO foresaw this a long time ago and now made a provision that nation states should have a minimum shop floor which the wage level will go. And usually our politicians will want to flaunt true federalism, and happily they usually use the United States as an example. But when it comes to this matter, they won't borrow to know that the United States have a national minimum wage, which before now is $10. And bidding, the new president is pushing $15 national minimum wage. But even while it's 10, some states in the United States are paying more than 10. So nothing stops a state in Nigeria to pay more than 30,000 or whatever is fixed as a national minimum.
But, you know, you said that this is taking us back 40 years. Over and over again, we see this contention coming up. There've always been attempts to move this from the exclusive list, legislative, to the concurrent list. And oftentimes it's the same argument that a lot of states cannot even pay what has been described as the national minimum wage. Some will argue maybe because of the strong arm tactics which is used to get the minimum wage at the end of the day. How do you respond to that?
Well, I don't know how the weak can use strong arm tactics against the strong. The weak in this circumstance is the vulnerable working people of Nigeria. To arrive at every minimum wage, there's always a tripartite negotiation that takes place, sometimes running for 2 years before a minimum wage is agreed on. And this meeting have representatives of government, represented by federal government, and in the case of Nigeria, the governors usually nominate 6 governors. Then the private sector nominates members, NECA, Manufacturers Association, and the labor movement now between the NLC and TUC nominate its own members. And after negotiation, that puts everything on the table, agrees to a minimum wage. When you talk about the arguments of states being able to pay, it looks so interesting and cheap. The whole states in the federation takes the political office holder remuneration from the fixing of mobilization and fiscal commission.
RAMFAC.
Yes. Now, all the councillors across the states, state assembly members, even commissioners, political appointees, use a national benchmark to pay. But when it comes to the worker salary, people raise these arguments. And now, even when you go to ability to pay, I usually use these 2 examples. First, it is a choice of payment. It's the choice. Today, and we proudly use that example, Jigawa State in federation account allocation is one of the lowest. In internal generated revenue, it's one of the lowest. But as I'm talking with you, Jigawa State is not owing pensioners, it's not owing salaries, it's paying minimum wage. And some states, we know how much they receive from FARC allocation monthly and have a heavy capacity in internal revenue generation are owing minimum wage and actually leading the fight to remove the minimum wage.
Well, some people will say that the circumstances around Jigawa State might be peculiar. First and foremost, they're a relatively new state. Maybe they do not have a huge workforce.
No, they have.
Some states
No, they have
a huge burden of
no, they have.
workforce.
They have. We know the figures. They have. And some of the governors who want minimum wage scrapped have about 1,500 personal assistants who are some on 50,000, 150,000, 100,000 monthly payment. And we all know some of them, the amount they spend monthly in using private charter jets to come to Abuja for a meeting.
In other words, they would rather pay their political hangers-on than...
Who have no single job or contribution to the state economy. They are so cheap that they can't even get a practical job, be it in agriculture, and put these citizens and pay them salaries based on production. But they use them as political thugs, used during elections, but they keep them on salary as long as they stay in office, pay them so much. We all know how much some of these governors spend on security vote. But you know the interesting thing. These people pursue what should be a national focus for national development as if their lifetime would be governors. We have seen so many who fought these things, having finished their offices, now want to support that minimum wage should remain there. I don't know what blinds some people in political position that they reason just because the immediate money they want to amass, because that's the whole target, to free more funds, to have more personal money for themselves.
Do you think so? Because you have...
I know so.
And not about that question. I'm wondering, because you have cited examples of some other countries abroad. Do you think that labor shoots itself in the foot when it doesn't also prescribe an hourly minimum wage?
No, it's not about shooting ourselves on the leg. It's about being realistic about our development stage. We are realistic. We know where we are developmentally. We know when those countries move to those levels. We have all this. It's a historical fact.
Where are we? Why do you think that, you know, that's going to...
Where we are realistically is that we still have an economy that is still very weak. We still have governors who reason that there shouldn't be minimum wage at all, and who go to argue that there shouldn't be minimum wage at all, a national minimum wage. That's where we are.
No, but some people have also argued that that would increase our productivity, and that would also that would also increase the earning capacity of workers who, especially at that minimum level where they can get more than one job, to be as is done elsewhere, you know, to be able to make ends meet.
I agree with you whole and entire, but in the negotiating table, that is why we go to negotiate. For example, when we went to those negotiations, if you go and check the original document submitted by the Nigerian Labour Congress, we showed what a national minimum wage realistically should be, taking into cognizance the exchange rate, taking into cognizance cost of living. Practically, a national minimum wage will not be anything less than 76,000 naira. But when you go to negotiation, you put all the cards on the table. These same governors came with the argument, because even the minimum wage prescription law shows that you have to consider all this ability to pay and all that. So on that, we make this huge concession. And that takes me to your first question, which you alluded that they feel we coerce them. And I say, how can the weak coerce the strong? Out of our own relative weakness, we consider, and consideration for the nation, we considered a cheap national minimum wage. As cheap as it is, these same governors who were opposed to it are still opposed to it and feel so hot that they feel that minimum wage must be removed so that they can get the state assembly, most which we know are in the pocket of the governors, that they can even approve 5,000 slave wage for the working people. And not considering what happens to Nigerians working in private organizations who will have nobody to speak for them. This shows the lack of national understanding, basic understanding of what governance means. Because the protection of its citizenry from slavery should be the primary concern of everybody in governance. The danger this portends to even national security seems to be missing in the eyes of the sponsors of this bill.
Let's quickly flip this to Lagos now. My colleague has questions for you. Ayo.
Well, I'm just wondering, Mr. Ikwe, how this is going to play out eventually, seeing that already the positioning has been that this will not happen as far as the NLC is concerned. Perhaps there is a need for the NLC and maybe perhaps Labour in its entirety to dichotomize the governor from the government of each state. If there is a legislation, shouldn't we be considering the economy or the economic capacity of each state to pay, as opposed to, lording over, so to speak, the recommendation that is going on here? Have we considered the productivity or otherwise of the staff in each of these institutions? Alluding to the question Mark asked, that if people were paid as they work, it will probably work better. Perhaps that is the subject of the conversation here. What mode, what shape should the laws in each of these states take that will align with the international labor laws? What do you think of that? Aren't we lumping everything together as opposed to looking at the issues, the politician different from the governance that's supposed to happen in the states?
Well, again, I won't be tired of answering these questions. First, I said the negotiations that led to minimum wage had the governors represented. The issue of ability to pay was brought to the table. And it is after looking at the aggregate that we had the minimum. Remember, this, and I think this is where the problem is. We are talking about the minimum shop floor of what can even take the worker to go to work and return back. Bear in mind, there is a UN stipulated basic earning that an individual can survive in a day. Calculate 30,000 naira, how much it translates to $1. But let us not even bother about the dollar. Let's use it in naira. It means that the family of a low-level worker who is on 13,000 naira minimum wage, a man and a wife and 4 children live on 1,000 naira a day to eat food, to wash their clothes, to pay their house rent. I mean, we should get this thing to basic, because we are discussing it as if we are discussing something in abstract. That these people have to eat, wash their clothes, drink water, fund their electricity bill.
Just a moment, Mr. Ikwe. The question is not about whether or not to reduce the minimum wage. I'm pretty sure that the argument is never going to be about bringing down this minimum wage, but the proprietary or otherwise. I don't think.
Are you aware that some governors have attempted to reduce the 30,000 naira minimum wage, but was handicapped by the fact that it's a national law? So it is clear, and why nations make sure there is a national minimum shop floor is because it has been anticipated that there could be people who will be mean not to care about, and that's why nation state, taking into cognizance the danger of having a workforce that is lowly, totally, completely demotivated, try to fix a national. I remember, this is a national minimum shop floor. Secondly, the wage structure of a state is determined by each state through negotiation with the workers of the state. What we are talking here is the minimum, the lowest level of workers you get, not the salary structure and wage structure of state governments.
Right. So clearly there's still a lot of issues to clean up in the labor industry, issues around productivity, equity, and this will take me back to the question Mark asked earlier. And personally, I'm not quite clear what you mean by saying that Nigeria is not at that point where we can begin to talk about hourly rates. You sounded like you were saying that we have not gotten to that point. There's still a long road ahead. Just what do you mean by that?
No, I need you to get me clear. For me, I want us to start hourly rate today. I have a national minimum wage for an hourly pay. I want it to happen now, even as I'm still in the studio. But we have gone to negotiations, and the other people in the table are not ready to discuss it. And it's a tripartism. You don't impose it on anybody. And you can imagine the cheapest, which is what we have adopted, is now vehemently being opposed by some governors and some sections of the political class.
Right. Okay. So, I mean, a couple of issues we want to touch, but I think that would be quite important to always raise it, because I think it will clean up a lot of issues. It will make things a bit more transparent. People get paid as they work, such that they can also aspire to earn more. But let's quickly bounce this back to the fuel price, because just yesterday I bought petrol for 173, and Labour has been in talks with the government since last year, and during that process we've seen fuel price hikes about twice. And this time last year we're buying petrol for 121 naira thereabouts, now for 173 naira. Yes, Labour has said they will protest regarding this, this minimum wage bill, but regarding this recent fuel price hike, what is Labour going to do?
No, first, the information of last year, 121, is not correct, because for over 2 years, we moved to 141 and have had adjustments since then.
Pardon me, 141, right.
That's for that. Then, the Labour have been on negotiation with government since last year, and that one have delayed because this argument, usually it's interesting. It's just like now we are debating about national minimum wage. Even a section of the media is beginning to sound as if we are disturbing the country. It's good to always deal with history. When it was power, the privatization of the power sector, we opposed it to a point that everybody felt we were disturbing the country from moving forward, because all sorts of promises was given about what will happen once power is privatized. Now, historically, it has not happened. Now on petroleum, since the regime of IBB, the NLC have maintained a position that the only way forward is that we must refine our products locally and sell it, even recently, we said, even if we want to discuss about deregulation, it must not be import driven. Because clearly we have always maintained we will be going through a vicious circle. Because when you depend on import of a product, the international market indices and factors will determine the price. For example, whenever the naira devalues, automatically the price goes up. And by the time you import and pay the prices of bringing it back, demurrage, pay NIMASA, pay MPA, and pay all the duties that involves import, the price will jump up.
So just one.
So we have been consistent.
Yes, but
that the only way forward
is
that we must refine our products locally, and if we don't do, we will remain on a vicious circle of an attempt to increase the price of petroleum.
So what's the way forward now?
The way forward is that we must have the courage, find the wherewithal to refine our products locally. That's the only way forward. If you don't, even if you say the landing cost is 182 today, if tomorrow, which should be our desire as a country that produces crude moves up to 120, the price will move up to 400.
Well, it's a situation that is going to be, we're definitely going to be monitoring to see just how you will follow through, we know, with the government authorities to see how the cycle can be broken. But we have to thank you so much for coming on Sunrise Today this morning. Honorable Uche Ekoe is Head of International Relations at the Nigeria Labour Congress and also liaison officer with the National Assembly of Nigeria. We have to thank you for coming on Sunrise Daily.
Thank you very much.
We also see here some of your comments and tweets. NLC and the minimum wage. Anybody is tweeting saying every state can pay minimum wage. State governors that dash SUV worth 10 million naira to their loyalists in the state for no good reasons. Not just one, but over 10 luxury cars in their state. Well, people are certainly watching. That's what anybody is talking about this morning.
Certainly, there are so many messages that one could take, but we really have to let it go this morning. We have to thank you all very much for watching. I'm Ayo Makine. Have a wonderful rest of your beautiful day.
And I'm Kaido Kikilu. It's always great to have you join us on the program.
And I'm Alpa Ogun Yusuf. Have a lovely day.